If you listen very closely, you can hear the sound of plenty of cheering from the Netflix offices. Why? Because this man right here, Mr. Box Office himself, Daniel Ricciardo, is back in Formula 1. 8 months after leaving the sport for what many thought would be a 1-year sabbatical at the very least, but his return has happened a lot sooner than anticipated, and it is a homecoming of sorts because he will be joining the AlphaTauri team, where of course he had first made his debut, like pretty much every other Red Bull Junior to have come through that program, when the team was of course known as Toro Rosso. But this is, remember, the same Daniel Ricciardo who said that he wouldn't want to be returning to a race seat just to be a part of the grid or just to make up the numbers. And AlphaTauri in 2023 aren't the same force. They have been consistently struggling to score points and would be one of 3 of the slowest cars in Formula 1 right now. So why exactly is it that Ricciardo is making his return with this particular team? What is the rationale, and why is it that this return is happening so suddenly in the middle of the season? These are the things we're going to be talking about in this particular video. First off, let's talk about what the major terms of the deal are. He will be spending the rest of the 2023 season with AlphaTauri, and it is it's not a full-time move in the sense that you'd remember Ricciardo was in fact contracted to Red Bull as their reserve driver, and with Red Bull, the way it works is that whoever's contracted to Red Bull can also be used as an option for AlphaTauri. That is why he's going over to AlphaTauri on loan from Red Bull Racing. And as we'd mentioned before, this return comes 8 months after he last raced in a Formula 1 car, and at a time when most people assumed he would in fact be joining, or rather taking a year-long sabbatical from the sport, because in his own terms he was tired and needed a bit of a refresh to rediscover whether or not he still had that drive, that hunger and that want to be racing. Recent signs did in fact point to that being the case. Ricciardo said multiple times that he would in fact be looking for a race seat as early as 2024, and he revealed to media during the Australian Grand Prix, which is of course a home race for him, that he felt that hunger and that itch to get back into a car again. And now, well, he's going to be back from the next race in Hungary. But why exactly is it that they dropped Nick de Vries, the person who, of course, Ricciardo will be replacing? Well, this is an unfortunate reality that, de Vries, who's someone who had to really wait for his opportunity to get to F1, could only get half a season in a Formula 1 car. Again, not ideal in any stretch of the imagination, especially when you consider that this was, in fact, de Vries' rookie year in the sport. But, well, that is the nature of the way Red Bull have operated. So he gets only half a season. And truth be told, it did seem like he was on thin ice recently. In fact, he struggled to score points. In fact, he scored absolutely no points in any of the races that have been completed so far. And the best finish that he's had has been a 12th place finish. Add to that the fact that he was consistently being outclassed by Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, who, whilst a speedy driver, can also be erratic occasionally, and you can understand why it is that AlphaTauri said, okay, this risk is not really working out at all, and it's time we cut our losses, bring in someone like Ricciardo, who's a proven performer at Formula 1 level. Remember, he's someone who's won you 9 races as well, so definitely no slouch behind the wheel, no matter what it is that was happening with him when he was at McLaren. So it wasn't an easy decision, I'm sure, but of course Red Bull have been known to be one of the more ruthless teams in the business. They've done these sort of driver swaps before. You remember Max Verstappen made his debut in 2016 because the team was done with Daniel Kvyat and swapped both of them. Kvyat was sent to Toro Rosso, Max was bought to Red Bull. Then, of course, Pierre Gasly suffered a similar fate. Alex Albon has suffered a similar fate. So, as I said, this really is nothing new. It just continues a long tradition of Red Bull of swapping drivers. But again, you go back to the early parts of the video and I said that Ricciardo did make it very clear that he wouldn't be making a comeback just to fill in the numbers on the grid, and that he'd want to be making a comeback in a winning car. AlphaTauri at this point are anything but a winning car. They're a car that are struggling to even score points. So why exactly has Ricciardo agreed to this deal in the first place? Well, the motives are really rather simple. For one, this move gives Ricciardo an F1 comeback at a time when there doesn't really seem to be much movement in terms of the driver market if you're looking at the quote-unquote top teams. Ferrari seem pretty locked in, at least for 2024, if not beyond. The same can be said about Mercedes, despite the fact that Lewis Hamilton hasn't signed a new contract. We all know it's going to be a matter of time. And Red Bull, well, even though there has been some pressure on Sergio Perez, few were expecting him to be replaced, although again, as I said, that could have potentially happened too. Now, the other thing is that it puts Ricciardo back in an environment which he's very familiar with. Remember, he started his Formula One career with AlphaTauri, the team that was back then known as Toro Rosso. So it's obviously a comfortable and a familiar team for him. But more importantly, the whole point of being an AlphaTauri racer is to one day be able to compete in the Red Bull car. It's a pathway of sorts, and that is in fact the main reason, is that if Ricciardo steps into an AlphaTauri, does better than what let's say De Vries has been doing, and shows that look, he's backing up his performances, even if he's not able to get a podium or anything, if he can consistently show that he's outperforming the car, it may very well pave a way for a Red Bull return, because truth be told, there is plenty of pressure on Sergio Perez as well. You'd remember that whilst we constantly talk about Max Verstappen winning every race in a dominant, boring way, Sergio Perez has more often than not struggled in recent races, to the point where in the past 4 races he's been unable to make it out of the first session of qualifying. More often than not, he's leaving himself with a mountain to climb in the races, and he hasn't been able to cut through the field the way someone like a Verstappen would. So there's obviously a little bit of pressure even on Sergio Perez. Perhaps there was more so on De Vries, which is why we see Ricciardo now replacing De Vries at AlphaTauri. But who knows? If Ricciardo can do really well, there may very well be that opening in the Red Bull team which may make way. And of course, he has said previously that he'd like to finish off his F1 career at Red Bull. That would be the dream for him. Whether or not he gets to live out that dream, well, at this point, it's entirely in his hands, because if he does a good job at AlphaTauri, there's no way that Red Bull will overlook him, no matter how good or bad Perez's performances get. Because again, he's someone that the team is familiar with, proven quantity, and could very well be a better option as the second driver than what Perez has been recently. At least that's how I feel about things. What do you guys think? You can let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and tap that bell icon as well. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and don't forget to download the AajTak app. Plus, if you're already on the channel, go ahead, check out some other videos that we've done. But for now, from my side, it's goodbye.